Hannah Murray on TRE in the afternoon.
Joining us on the line now is Richard Hall, who lives in Malaysia. Having trained as a youth worker, he turned his creative attention to writing during a particularly difficult period of his life. After contributing to a lengthy investigation and court case relating to the abuse he suffered at a young age, he would now like to find ways to support other survivors and victims of sexual and domestic abuse. His book, I'm Fine, is a true story of trust, betrayal and exploitation. Welcome to the show, Richard.
Hi, thank you very much for having me on.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thanks so much for joining us. And I imagine writing this book, and I guess then having to talk about it, has been quite challenging. It must have been really difficult kind of reliving it all and writing it down, was it?
Yeah, and in a lot of ways it was almost exposure therapy, because the first draft flowed very easily. But then in the editing and development stage, I had to reread each bit over and over again. And slowly, the bits that were making me cry or shake or have some sort of emotional reaction, they stopped having that intensity. So along then with the therapist, I was then able to actually move on from some of it, or at least process it.
Yeah, amazing. So it ended up being quite cathartic and therapeutic for you.
Very much, yes. It's certainly during the police trial and the CPS involvement, I couldn't see an end to anything. But now we're a year on from the conviction, and I can say my life is a lot better than it was before I started this process.
Oh, fantastic. So if you don't mind, can you tell us a bit about what happened to you then all those years ago?
Yeah, well, it was back in 1996. I needed more support than my mother could give me. I was very fortunate that when I came out, my mother supported me, but it stayed a secret between the two of us. So she found me a counselling agency to go to. And as part of that counselling agency, I was introduced to an administrative worker who was there to effectively recruit young men for his own needs. And yeah, I'm in his life in total for about a year and a half. And yeah, it was a dark time, but I was lucky enough when I was writing the book that I was still naive about my past. So I didn't write a book about abuse. I wrote a book about coming out where I happened to be abused in it. So it's not as miserable or traumatic as it sounds.
I mean, it's shocking, isn't it? And disgusting how many people who are put in these positions of power and trust to look after youngsters who are effectively vulnerable anyway, end up abusing them. I mean, it's absolutely horrendous. And we see these stories coming out all the time. I mean, it must be very, very difficult to get over something like that.
It is. On average, it takes about 20 years for a victim to actually start speaking and coming forward. It's why there's so many in the news now coming forward in their middle age like me, because it took us that 10, 20, 30 years to actually be able to say the words. And all I can say to people out there now working in any environment or people with children is the adults in the room have to be uncomfortable. We have to get over the fear of asking, who is this person? Why are they doing this? If I said I want to go and read books to children in a library, the library should be asking me why. That's not my demographic. That's not my audience. And I wouldn't be offended by being asked that question. But the people in charge need to be uncomfortable and willing to ask and willing to worry who these people are. Yeah. Because if we as the adults aren't uncomfortable, the children that are left in these rooms are significantly more uncomfortable than us.
I want to ask you about the 20-year thing, because a lot of people who don't have experience of abuse, either themselves or with family or friends, have said a lot over the years with these famous cases that have come out. Oh, why did they wait so long to talk about it? Why didn't they report it at the time? You know, really flippantly, as if, well, if it really happened, they should have and would have said something at the time. What would you say to that then?
It's difficult if you haven't been through it to understand it. And I appreciate that. but is children especially, their minds are so plastic and malleable. And we, at the time, find ways to deal with it and to justify why we were there or explain it away, make it normal so we can carry on existing at the time. And then as we progress into our later teens and our 20s, certainly for myself, I was saying I dealt with it. It just happened. I processed it. It's fine. And then as I get older and I start opening those boxes again and exploring it, I realized how unfine it was. And that was when I could first objectively see it. But especially with children that have been groomed, is understanding that it wasn't right is a difficult thing to get to. Is as I was writing it and started speaking to the police, I was lucky enough to have my sister around, and she's amazing. And I was still sat there defending Tim. I was still saying, but he looked after us, but he was good to us. And she was brave enough to turn around to me and go, but you were a child. And so I was still defending him. And it wasn't until my thinking and my thought patterns were changed, I was able to see it for what it was and see him for what he was.
Yeah, I think it can be very confusing as an adult looking back, as you say, at your experience as a child when the abuser has been someone who you trusted, whether it's a family member or a social worker or a priest or a policeman or all these people who are in power and positions of trust. It can be confusing, and a lot of people who were abused by family members say, oh no, but I loved him and I know he loved me, the same way as you're saying, you kind of stood up for him even though what he did was clearly wrong, and you have every right to feel completely angry at him. Have you gone through those anger feelings?
It's very, my emotions swing a lot. At one point during the trial, it is when he first pled not guilty. It wasn't anger, it was rage. And it was rage of how could he do this to us? But it was then 2 years later when I was sat in a room with the policeman who'd been looking after me the whole time, I was still saying the same thing. How could he do this to you? And the policeman just went, he doesn't care about you. And that was the first time it had ever crossed my mind. The levels of manipulation that a groomer especially will put on a child to make them believe that they're safe and that they're secure. I was not just defending him, I still believed he liked me. And it was nothing to do with me. It was everything to do with his perversion.
Yeah. Gosh, I'm so sorry. It's awful. Have you gone through life having trust issues? Has it been difficult for you to trust other people and to open up to people?
Very much. And the general opinion that people that have been through this are lying is one of the things that held me back from speaking about it. And now looking at the statistics, you've got less than 1% that either recant their statement or are found to be untrue, whereas you've got 70% of people that are accused of being found guilty. So there's a very clear group that is lying, and it's not the victims. So to then come through and speak about it, it becomes cathartic. But for me especially, no matter how difficult this is for me, if I, as somebody that is comfortable in their life and is secure in their life, can't stand up and say, this is happening, it's still happening, and it's happening too much, then how can somebody that isn't in a position of comfort come forward and say that?
And what happened when you went to the police 2 decades later? How did you go about it, and what was their initial reaction?
First of all, I phoned 101, the non-emergency line. And they were great. They took the statement very compassionately. And then 2 CID policemen came out to see me, asked a few more questions, and then gave me some time to think about whether I wanted to go fully on the record. And with the way the system is set up now, you can give your statement in video, which means for the actual offences, the grotesque parts, you're not going to have to then discuss that again in court. That video is then put to court as your evidence, and you can be cross-examined about why you were there or how you knew this person, but you're not going to have to relive that experience in front of a jury. So the police, Wiltshire and Swindon police, were amazing, DC Duff in particular. is they supported me the entire time. They were always available on either text or email or phone call. And they did a wonderful job without any judgment or giving me any fear or any extra worry.
That's amazing to hear. And that's really interesting to hear about the video statement, because I think for a lot of people, that's often the worry of coming forward, however much later after the event actually happened, having to relive it again and to keep reliving it in court, or different policemen to keep having to go through it all can be really traumatic. So that's really interesting to know that you don't have to do that anymore.
Yeah, they're doing their best to try and protect victims. So even when actually in court, and I'm not going to say that being in court is in any way a nice experience. No. But when it's time for myself or another victim to go on stand, the defendant is removed from the court. We're brought in, a screen is put up so we can only see the barristers, the jury and the judge. And then the defendant's brought back into the dock. So you never have to see them or interact with them if you don't want to. So they are bringing these things in and implementing them well, so that you're not ever face to face or accidentally in the room, and you're not having to be in any contact with them if you don't want to be.
That's really good. And I'm interested in understanding, if you're okay talking about it, what kind of evidence they had from something that happened 20 years ago, before mobile phones and similar time around the internet coming out. What kind of evidence, how were they able to prove that he did what he did?
That was one of the things that stopped me from thinking about reporting, was that I didn't have emails or photographs. And Tim he wasn't clever, but he was wise. He knew to never be in photographs with us. But I was still in contact with one of the other victims. And so after I came forward, about 6 months after that, he then came forward with his story. And then the police found a third victim and got him on record. So that was the basis of the evidence. There's three of us, all with entirely separate stories that are all linked and have the similar behavior patterns. And that was the clincher, that it would be impossible to get three people and selected witnesses and the limited evidence that we did each have, and for that to then be fabricated.
Mm. And presumably at the time when the abuse was going on, and I guess for many years later, you had no idea that it happened to anyone else as well?
Unfortunately, no. When I first met Tim, that was how the introduction was made. My counsellor at the agency said that if I was looking for friends, they could introduce me to one of the boys that lived at Tim's house. So when I was introduced to him, there was two boys that were slightly older than me. One was officially his boyfriend and the other one was living there. So we no longer had contact with the boyfriend, but I did still have limited contact with victim B. So we had that aspect. We were separated from each other deliberately by the CPS so that it couldn't be put across that we were fabricating it. Our communication was restricted. But there were three people that we know of. There was one previous that we know of. There's two or three other potentials in the past. And then during the investigation, the investigating officer told me there have been other allegations around the country, but that person never took it to court.
Gosh. And when it was happening at the time, Richard, you were 14. I'm not going to ask details as to what exactly the abuse consisted of, but did you know right from the start that what he was doing was wrong? I mean, this is the issue, I guess, with children being abused. It can be very confusing. You can think, oh, maybe this is normal. This is happening to everybody. How did you feel at the time?
I knew I didn't like it and I knew I was uncomfortable. But he'd already managed to create a stakes and consequences environment. So if I was going to complain, I was going to lose my only teenage friend at the time. And then he had taken us into pubs and clubs. So we were in an adult environment where you see that kind of behavior going on. And that in itself normalized it. And then with the tactics of groomers where, trying to think of an example, they would pull your trousers down and then laugh about how it's a joke. And so you feel uncomfortable and you know it's wrong, but they're laughing. So is it normal? And you start questioning yourself. And it's that transfer of power and building up the consequences of you objecting. If I objected, I lost my friend. I lost access to the pub and the club, which was the only environment at the time I could be myself. I was told I wasn't going to be believed. I was told that the police wouldn't help us. And if I tried to report something, they would dig into me and charge me with something else. It's all done with that way to move all of the power into them and make us trust them.
Gosh, how awful. And did you ever consider speaking to someone at the time? Did you feel that you could or should tell your friend or a parent, or did it not cross your mind at all because you were worried about the consequences?
I couldn't tell my mum because that would have stopped me from seeing my best friend and, as I say, access to the environment where I could be myself. I was asked by somebody else who was older at the time, when he found out what had been happening, why I didn't tell him. And the only answer I could have is when I would go to his house and I would sit and I would randomly cry, he would just support me. He didn't push. He was under the belief he knew why I was crying, but he was wrong because he'd been fed lies by the groomer as well. And so there wasn't really anyone to tell. And the other person, the person I did speak to, he was also being abused by Tim. So we inadvertently normalized the behavior within ourselves because we were both going through it. We both understood it. Therefore, it was normal.
Mm. And were you able to establish or understand during the trial or sometime after what he went on to do, how he went on to live his life? Was he abusing throughout his whole life, or was it a certain period and then he somehow lived a normal life after that? Do you know that?
As far as we know, he carried on abusing. And then the reason I called the police is that I'd written the book and I'd started processing, I'd started therapy, and it was suggested to me that my fears of what might he be doing now, to resolve them, Google, because 20 years he will have been caught. So this was in 2020. And in 2017, he was convicted with child sexual abuse images. He got a slap on the wrist, a £250 fine, and 5 years on the offenders register. And that was the motivation to make the call, because I could carry on lying to myself and say it was just us, except we now had the evidence that it wasn't. So from that point onwards, if I didn't do everything I could, I didn't expect it to go to court. I expected it to be just logged and maybe I would be called back to help out with someone else's trial. But yeah, if I didn't do everything I could, then if he touched another child, then that blood was on my hands. I was complicit because I knew it would happen. Yeah. So I hung up on the police 6 times before I actually spoke to them because I really didn't want to, but I didn't feel like I had a choice.
And how do you feel now, the fact that he's been convicted? You've written a book about the story. How has that changed and affected your life and view of the whole situation?
I was just talking to Victim B earlier today, and we both still struggle with guilt. Like we have somehow done this to him. We've affected his life. That is diminishing as the years go on, but it's difficult. I'm happier. I'm more comfortable. I'm able to speak openly to therapists and work through issues I'm having and try and, eventually put this completely behind me. But it is a lifelong thing. It's the mistrust of other people, the suspicion. If someone's nice to me randomly, I instantly question why. Is that kind of thing I don't think will ever go away.
Mm-hmm. It's a sort of fine line, isn't it? Because I guess in one way it's good to be on guard. I guess it's good not to quickly trust strangers all the time, but at the same time it can block you from having good relationships with people, can't it?
Very much, very much. Thankfully, I've got some very good people in my life. And so I'm one of those people that my friends are made through my other friends.
Right.
So it's always one person through to another. But it is very much the case of if I get a bad feeling about someone, I can't let it go and I can't be around them because it becomes the only thing I can see.
Yeah. Well, it's probably good gut instinct.
It was certainly useful as a youth worker. You could see the children that had knowledge before their years. And I would never directly ask a young person, but to be able to have that concern and then create an environment where they could talk if they wanted to or felt able to. It was a useful skill there.
Yeah. And I think one of the most, if not the most upsetting things about victims and survivors of abuse and sexual abuse particularly, you mentioned guilt there, that the guilt and shame that you feel when you haven't done anything wrong. I find that so upsetting that you're carrying this guilt and shame when you're the victim.
It is difficult. When the conviction first came through, I was in floods of tears and all sorts of different emotions. And my husband was doing the right thing and desperately trying to support me. And I had to tell him to shut up, because he was saying, you did this, you got him, you achieved this, you stopped him. And I just had to tell him to shut up. It's like, I can speak to you when I'm less emotional, but right now, stop blaming me, because that's what it felt like. And I know it wasn't his intention. Mm-hmm. And over the next few days, I was able to vocalize it properly. But the levels of manipulation that a groomer or an abuser will put someone under, it's weapons grade.
Yeah. It's shocking. Well done. I mean, I really, my heart goes out to you, Richard, for everything that you went through and are still going through. But you were able to talk about it, and the conviction did happen, and he deserves it. Don't feel, yes. Please don't feel guilty. Please don't. He's in the right place, which is great. And you've written a book, and I really hope and believe, I'm sure it will go on to help other people to know that they're not alone and that they can speak out about it as well.
Thank you. Yeah, that is my hope, that it reaches someone that needs it.
Yeah. Well, if people want to get a copy of the book, I'm Fine, it's available now on our website, tre.radio, and it's by Richard Hall, who we've been chatting with. Richard, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you again for having me on.